Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Well, thank you, Sean. That was an amazing intro, as usual. You know, it's great. Sean does this every week for us, every time we release a podcast. Well, today is a special treat for me. If you guys saw my article a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a game called Radio General by Foolish Mortals. And today we have the creator, inventor of Foolish Mortals. And before I announce Michael Long, I am joined today by the video Zampolet on Steam, Paul. But
hello,
Michael,
everybody.
Welcome. How you doing today?
Doing great.
Oh, did we lose Michael?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm doing great as well. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk Radio General. I love the game.
Awesome.
Tell us a little.
I love it too. I'm always happy to talk about it.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the game, about the creation process, and we'll pepper you up with questions as best we can.
Sure. So, in case the viewers didn't read your article, Radio General is a World War II real-time strategy game. It's where you're a general sitting in a tent. All you have in front of you is a map and a radio. And so, instead of a regular strategy game, you cannot see where units are. Instead, you have to ask them verbally using the radio, which means talking into your microphone for voice commands or speech recognition, and then they answer back to you using voice acting. So this creates a very unique style of game where the fog of war is a central component of that.
You undersold it, sir. I as I said in the article, it is an amazing game. It is different than any other game that you ever played. I think it's historically accurate. It's a lot of fun. What inspired you to kind of do this game? And it took a couple of years. You didn't do this overnight, from what I hear.
That's right. So it took about 3 years, actually. 2 years part-time, 1 year full-time. And for inspiration, I'm Canadian to start off with, and I love World War II games and movies and books. And I always felt that Canada doesn't get the recognition it deserves. We're always overshadowed by our British allies as well as the Americans and the Russians, even though Canada did contribute quite a bit to the war effort despite its relatively small population. So I want to shine a spotlight on Canada's involvement in the war. And also just strategy video games are just my all-time favorite. So I've always wanted to make a real-time strategy game. StarCraft and Warcraft are my favorite games ever, as well as Company of Heroes. So I kind of want to make something like that, but basically I'm a single solo indie developer. There's no way I could create a full-blown real-time strategy game with fancy animations and visuals and graphics and all that. I'm a programmer by trade. So part of the idea came from the fact that I can't do art. So how do I make a real-time strategy game that involves as little art as possible? Well, you just simply don't include the art, don't put it in the game, and hide everything from the player. So you're just sitting in this little 3D model of a tent, and I don't have to make unit animations and attack animations and stuff. Just very simple, like particle effects and explosions, because I'm hiding everything from the player, so I don't actually have to, hire too many artists to make the game. So part of it to highlight Canadian history, and then part of it was just what needs must for what a programmer can do on their own.
I have a curious question. You are an indie developer. I don't know if you shopped it around to major developers, but when you pitched in this idea, did they say, "What? That's kind of different, sir"? Or when you told people you were working on this project, what was their reaction? Because until you play the game, and I recommend everybody out to play the game, it's so different from everything else that I've ever played. What's been that reaction, I think, before it released, before people can get their hands on it?
Sure. So, a lot of people had the reaction of, wow, that's really different. However, a number of them said, "Oh, so kind of like that game Tom Clancy's End War, which was a game for the Xbox 360, where you gave voice commands into your microphone, and that was done as a result because playing an RTS on a console with a console controller sucks. So they decided, okay, we'll use voice commands to try to get around not having a mouse. And the game was like fun enough, but it wasn't very strategically deep. So taking that idea of the voice commands and actually making it part of the fog of war makes it a much deeper and more interesting experience. A few other people, after hearing the idea, thought that it wouldn't really work. They thought it'd be too confusing, the pace would be off, and people get very frustrated. And certainly, part of the game is getting frustrated. There's no doubt about that. But hopefully, you have enough fun and enjoy the other parts of it. That part of the frustration is actually you realize that part of the frustration is actually part of why it works.
Paul, do you find the game frustrating?
If I find it frustrating, it's because I'm frustrated at my own self. All right, it is. I'm looking at it now. I'm playing it now. I'm actually smoking a pipe, and I got to tell you, smoking a pipe in the game, and to me, it's extraordinarily ambient. All the transitions are smooth. I mean, for an indie developer, I think it's a exceptionally well put together game full of features, and of course we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there's just a lot of neat things in this game, all the while of simulating the dilemmas and the chaos of managing a battle zone.
Yeah, and that to me, I think, is the beauty of this game. You know, command and control is one of the things that when you explain to people how modern militaries work, they can't get their heads around it, and they don't realize that a brigade commander, which you kind of play in this game, is sitting back and he's only as good as his radio and only as good as his company commanders telling him battle reports where the Germans are. I need support. I can't go on anymore. And the game does this, and it really gives you that feeling. And I tell you what, it's a dreadful feeling of, wait, I haven't heard from this unit, or
Yep.
I wonder how that attack's going in, and you keep pinging your troops. And I believe that they do tell you sometimes they're too busy, right?
That's right. They do sometimes tell you too busy. And an interesting thing we do actually model is that the troops don't always know themselves what's happening. Sometimes
Yeah.
they'll think they're winning, and sometimes they'll think they're losing. Actually, generally, the troops always ask for reinforcements even when they don't need them. Because, of course, when you're under fire and there's explosions going on, you're panicking. Of course, you think it feels like you're losing, when in actual fact, you outnumber the enemy and you are going to win. So we do model in that uncertainty into the game of when they're giving their reports to you. You can't always take them quite at face value.
So they're lying to me. Yeah,
Well, I mean, unintentionally. They're panicking, right? But it's
yeah.
not their fault.
So everybody out here, real life lesson: command sucks. Um, the research on the game, I think I told you last time. My first army in Flames of War was Canadian. My bolt action army is Canadian. I've read a bunch of Canadian books. Once I can get through the Canadian to American translations, I find that history fascinating, and I agree with you. It needs to be talked about more. Um, Being that it's funny, some of our staff at No Dice No Glory are in Canada, and they're like, "How do other people not know this?" And I'm like, "Because they're Americans, and
Yeah.
we won the war. We won the war on our own, but like the Canadian contribution, every Canadian that served overseas volunteered to go, um, and it is such a great story, and you capture it so well. But you capture that blind man's bluff of combat. Um, you know, for people that don't know, we tried to record this last week, and somebody here screwed up. And I'm going to blame Craig because I'm staring at you, Craig, to make sure you keep recording. But take us through some of the things that a player goes through in the game, and why you decided to put some of those mechanics in the game.
Sure. So, when when radioing, asking troops for their coordinates, there's some fun stuff. Well, I call it fun, maybe not to everyone. But there's some things that can happen to your troops. As you mentioned before, sometimes you can lose contact with them. So when you ask them to report status, all you receive back is just empty static. This could mean several things. Either their radio is broken, or basically their radio is broken, they're out of contact, or maybe the entire unit's been wiped out or wounded. You don't know. So you won't actually know until if you send a unit to within, if you send a different unit with working radios nearby, they can then give that unit working radios, so you can reestablish contact with them. But if they're down and out, you may not even know till the end of the mission. At the end of the mission, each unit does report in if it can and tells you their rough status. As well, going through certain terrain like forests, often your units can get lost, and I especially love this. Instead of your units giving you grid coordinates on a map telling you like they're at grid A3, instead they'll say, we're lost, but I can see a river 2 kilometers to the east. And then you have to go look on your map and actually figure out, well, where could they possibly be that there's a river 2 kilometers to the east? Or maybe they also say there's a hill to the north, 1 kilometer. So where is there a river and a hill? You can triangulate their position, actually figure out where they are, and then you give them a relative direction saying move east or move west, and eventually they'll end up on a road and then figure out where they are because their maps show where they are on a road. So you actually need to use basic geography lessons and triangulate their position when they get lost, which I absolutely love. Though some people get kind of frustrated at that. I mean, eventually they will find themselves. You just give them any direction to walk in. Eventually they should find themselves, but that could take them out of the fight for several hours, which they could be desperately needed elsewhere.
And
Well, I think
go ahead.
so. I think the hallmark of what makes a great war game is that it gives realistic results based on what inputs you put into this game. And oftentimes the issue that I have with war games is that you've got a perfect view of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And here you don't have that. And so the inputs, the differential between the interface that you place into the game, giving orders, or even clicking a button and dragging units, that is all taken away, and it becomes a series of vocal commands that you are emotionally responding. At this point, you're emotionally responding to what's chaos. That there's this fog of war here, and I think the game just does great at simulating. I'm looking at a battle right now that I had played, and it was a battle of Liam Forte, right? And you're given engineers in this game, and I love just the units in this game, the combined arms aspect of it. That I've got these engineers that are move in to clear a road. Well, a fool as I am, I lose patience, right? As many commanders might lose patience in order to achieve an objective, and there is a time limit in this game. So I send my infantry around thinking, maybe there's not a minefield, down this grid. Sure enough, there's a minefield. And this game does great in terms of the ambiance and the sound. I mean, you hear your men getting blown up by landmines as they wade through a grid, and you suffer the frustration of a commander having made a bad decision. I should have waited for my engineers to clear the minefield, but anyways, that's I really enjoy this game and everything that it replicates, and then on top of that, you've got the media. So can you tell us a little bit about the media as well, the media aspect of this game? It is a well-researched game with the newsreels and everything else.
Absolutely. So most of our before each mission, we show the player a number of photos and videos actually from World War II, and mostly around the time period that the battle actually took place. Almost all of these assets came from the Library and Archives Canada, which is a government website that has all of this all this media that's public in the public domain, and it's absolutely fantastic. Great resource. In fact, it turns out most governments, if they take photos during wars over 50 some years ago, all that stuff's in the public domain and free to use. So we actually do include, propaganda videos from the Canadian Army. I especially love those. The narrators talking in their cheesy wartime accent.
Yes, yes, I
Absolutely
love
love
it.
those. And also a lot of photos of the battlefields. Luckily, World War II did have more cameras around than in World War One. Still, of course, black and white. But you get to actually see uh, the lives of soldiers, not just on the battlefield, but doing rather mundane things like washing their laundry or writing letters home. And we actually get to read some letters and some field manuals and
Hmm.
other resources there. In fact, we include the entire infantry tactics field manual from 1939 or 40 in the game as a PDF. So super fun to research that and go through all those available resources. And I'm always shocked when all these other historical war games, they could be doing this too. There's no reason why they can't go to their government website and look up all these photos. In fact, the American government have even
That's
more
right.
photos and resources. These are free resources. They're awesome. They look great. In fact, the logo key art of the game on the Steam page is just a picture of the Canadian Army. You can see a tank going down a road in a town in Italy, and that's just a public domain photo, and it looked great. So why did I need to pay an artist to create some custom art when real life looks so good? So yeah, absolutely amazing. All this available footage and research material there. As a side note, the game was made with an educational angle in mind, and it is being used in a few local high schools to teach Canadian history in World War II. And if any teachers are
That-
listening, I'm always happy to send free educational copies to you if you want to use them in your classrooms for whatever.
Wow.
Wow, that's fantastic. I mean, this game, Radio General is a lot like a museum. The videos, the pictures, and the telegrams and everything else that acts as an intermission between the missions. It's actually a nice breather considering the chaos of command that you're dealing with when you're actually conducting a mission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am going to look for something I have. It was came out in 1943, and it's the Canadian Service Manual for Troops Going Overseas. And I have an original copy. If I can find it, I will contact you and get it to you. It is
Oh,
amazing. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to say it's racist or incorrect, but it was definitely 1943, and Canada had enemies. Um, and not very kind to the Japanese, but I guess it's the whole Winnipeg Grenadiers thing they were a little sore about. But this game is a kind of a piece of history, and the fact that it really does teach the Canadian story so well in a game that I find very tense and very replayable. Uh, I have played the game through. I've played most of the scenarios more than once, and the reason is because I learned from well, I kind of knew where the enemy was coming from, and if you understand tactics, you're like, obviously the Germans are going to come along that route. But I can beat the game a little bit better after playing it a few times, and the game almost kind of dares you to beat it a little bit more, uh, concisely. I think the second time, it's one of those games that kind of like, I'm going to challenge you, and it challenges you in a very unique way. I think the voices, and you said you got some voice actors, and you yourself are one of the voices. It had so much to it that I really, I always enjoy playing it. So one of
Mm-hmm.
the other
Absolutely, yeah.
features
The
is
voice acting was a lot of fun. I am one of.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, you don't want to use us. We definitely don't sound Canadian. Um, I can't. I could do a French Canadian goalie, but that's just from watching TV. Um, but yeah, I really dig the replayability of this game and the tense. And Paul, you played it quite a bit too. Do you find it really tense at times?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and that's why I enjoy the history part. It offers a nice, easy intermission from I wouldn't call it a frenetic pace. I mean, there's always a puzzle aspect to tactics. But yeah, it's definitely the combat can be intense when your infantry are breaking and they got tanks coming down the road and everything else, and Yeah, you've got to figure out where your guys are at because, no one's going to tell you but them over the radio. So, yeah, I definitely find the pace uh, chaotic and exciting.
So the voice command. Have you ever wondered how many of the players that play this game use voice or use the mouse? Because you don't need to use the voice commands, but it adds so much to the game.
Yeah.
It, what has been the reception of the voices?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, you don't have to use the voice commands to play the game, but the game's name is Radio General, and so that is the central premise, and it feels a lot more atmospheric, and you get more into the role play and the atmosphere, which is a big part of the game. So most people do try to use the voice commands, and if you have a Canadian accent and speak like myself, it works really, really well. If you've a different accent that's not North American, it works less well. We do have a UK speech model that helps some of our people overseas, but if you speak English as a second language, it definitely doesn't work as well. There's just so many accents out there that we can't account for all of them. So definitely, in fact, the game is quite well reviewed on Steam, but if you look at the negative reviews, in fact, most of them actually are like, oh, the voice commands don't work too well for me. And yeah, that's unfortunately just a very difficult technical problem. It's a hugely difficult technical problem, actually. Even Google and Apple, when you speak, into your smartphone, they still sometimes get words wrong. And if a multi-billion-dollar company can't get it right 100%, there's absolutely no way a small indie developer like myself can get it 100%. Though we do limit the vocabulary. We aren't looking for, the possible 10,000 words. We're probably only looking for 30 or 40 words. So our accuracy can be pretty decent. On a side note, a lot of players, sometimes it's not my fault if the speech recognition doesn't always work. Sometimes the players are using bad microphones and they aren't even aware of it because you don't hear yourself talking when you speak into a microphone. You don't hear the result. But if you're using a bad microphone, there's not much the game can do to help you. So it's not always my fault, but sometimes it is.
What about for Francophone Canadians?
Yeah, if it depends. It depends. If they spoke English from a very young age, it's not an issue. But if they got it later in life, it's often more of an issue the stronger their accent.
Yeah, yeah, sir.
So I got to tell you that I actually bought a microphone because of this game. I was using some cheap Logitech, and I guess I stick with what I know best. So I stuck with another Logitech just to actually upgraded it. And then I got to tell you, it works a hell of the voice commands in this game work a hell of a lot better in my Alexa. So that's a huge vote of confidence that you can beat out an Amazon, multi-billion-dollar company's product that's in everyone's house, and the voice commands work better than my stupid Alexa, which is as dumb as the day I bought it, anyways.
That's right. I should have actually tried to get sponsorship from Logitech microphones or something next time.
Yeah, definitely for the next game. Yeah, I can't even talk in front of her because she'll play like Alexa, play this song, and I'm like, is it me? Do I not speak English correctly?
Yeah.
But when I try a Canadian accent, it always works. Yeah, you hear Alexa now. Yeah, Alexa off. Alexa, what's your status?
That's right.
I'm not playing the game, so she's not gonna tell me. I think the voice commands just make the game a different experience.
Yes, absolutely.
It pulls you in. I would say good speakers are good too because you really want to listen to, if a unit's under fire, you hear that they're under fire. If they're a little stressed out, you hear they're stressed out. One of the things I think you do really well is getting that feel of what was going on with some of these guys in combat. What kind of research did you do for that? Because I find it really spot on.
Absolutely. So, I read a number of textbooks on World War II for the game, as well as other sources. As you mentioned, your emails. Mark Zwelk, or however you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
Some Tim Cook books, as well as other sources, and a lot of Library and Archives Canada. Also, I take my research very seriously, so of course I went and watched every single World War II movie I could possibly find. Band of Brothers, of course, not Canadian, but anything World War II, I consumed it before working on this project. So a lot of research went into it, and we cover most of the Canadian Army's actions in the game. We go all the way up to the Falaise Gap in France, and in the future we are looking to finish the Canadian Army story of probably DLC if the Channel ports, Belgium and Holland if the canals, and then a little bit into Germany. So it'll be nice to finish the Canadian Army's story in the war.
We'll see First Corps again.
That's right.
Awesome. Yeah, just to even talk about the Canadian contribution in the war, and reading any of Mark Z's books is amazing. He's a talented writer, and he really gives you that soldier view. You could tell that he doesn't like Guy Simmons very much. Very, very good writer, probably one of the best. Tim Cook does a little bit more general, where some of his books are very specific. But Fields of Fire, I think that he did a lot of stuff with Terry Kopp. Really good books, and they're not popular down here because it's not U.S. history. But if anybody's into the battle history of Canada or just World War II in general, pick up these books. I think Ortona is probably one of the best books he's ever written, and I've always recommend it to folks. Like, what's one book I have to have in my collection? And I'm like, you have to have that one. Have you seen a lot of, I'm sure this game is doing great in Canada. Have you seen, especially in the threads and forums, people are starting to get into the history that didn't know this before?
Somewhat. Actually, the sales in Canada actually aren't super high. You'd think they would be, but they're actually kind of shockingly low. They're only about 10% of the sales, and the majority are actually American. I guess
we have to change that.
I know. I guess it just turns out that our country's population is just less 10% of the U.S. population. So I guess we just don't have many people playing video games. But as for the history, yeah, it's been very fulfilling. Hearing some people thank me. They send me personal messages or emails sometimes saying, "Oh, thank you for including my grandfather's unit or battalion. Thanks for including this battle. My relative was in this battle." Some people said they were even moved to tears for some parts of the game. Not a historical part, but you do have to write letters home about soldiers under your command who died in action, and that is very touching for some people, especially if they've had relatives who fought in the war. Maybe their mothers or grandmothers actually received one of these letters. Very touching to hear some of that stuff.
It is. It's probably one of the. I don't know any other game that does that. I think there was an FPS about Vietnam that had you kind of do it, but not to this level. I find that one of the most interesting things. Commanders had to do that, and they had to take the time to do that. Usually, right after a battle. One of the things I dig is I love Canadian Orders of Battle because you guys had some very colorful battalions, regiments back then. We just use numbers in the United States.
Yeah.
It means nothing to anybody. But, I spent a lot of time in Winnipeg. So, playing around with, Fort Garry Horse and the Winnipeg Rifles, to me, it's, these are very popular units. I know I asked you last time. I'll ask you again because I think it's interesting. What are some of your favorite Canadian battalions? And within the game, if people haven't seen it, the battalions have like a historical trait to them of kind of what they were known for. And not 100% flattering, but historically accurate. What were some of your favorite battalions to put in the game and kind of pick their, hidden skill?
Yeah, so I'm from Saskatchewan, so I do like the Royal Regina Rifles. As well, probably my favorite one would be the Princess Patricia Light Infantry, based out of Edmonton nearby. Well, relatively nearby. Canada's pretty big. But choosing their traits was a lot of fun. Yeah. We basically just wanted a nice variety of them. Each trait we wanted to be significant in that they should change the way you use the unit. So they give a significant bonus, but then there's also a significant downside as well. Especially some of the traits like Zealous, where they fight very hard, they're very aggressive, but they actually will refuse your command to retreat. That's always a fun one, so be careful committing those guys. They can sometimes retreat on their own, but they won't obey your order to retreat. So that's a lot of fun. As for choosing them, yeah, it was a lot of reading. It was tough to decide on some of them, and sometimes you're like, yeah, I just kind of wanted to have some variety. So mostly accurate, but yeah, is some liberty taken there.
No, I would say it's pretty accurate. I mean, it's look, I find the history of a lot of your regiments very well documented, and you kind of know quite a bit about them. What was it? The 48th out of Toronto. What were they known as? The Glory Boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I forgot the name of the unit, but very
Highlander?
colorful, very interesting. That was a Highlander unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the plow jockeys, which I forgot that battalion. It just very very colorful units, and then very colorful, people, heroes that came out of the war. Some really great names that it. Like I said, if they did a Canadian Band of Brothers, they have a lot to choose from.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Within Canadian history, I couldn't pick a battalion. It can't be one Campera because we've already seen, Band of
Well,
Brothers were there. But
if we got two people to vote on Princess Patricia, then I think we have our unit, because I do like the Princess Patricia, and that comes from having played Combat Mission Shock Force. You get to play the Princess Patricia in that, so it was cool reading a little bit about their history and their role in the Cold War, and then I've got them. Unfortunately, they got butchered at the Battle of Ortuna the last time I played it, but it's that's my battalion of choice.
I'd have to pull for either one of the Winnipeg boys or the Van Deus because the Canadians in my family are all from Montreal, and they hate speaking English. I mean, maybe I'm not supposed to say that. I don't know. One question I love asking video game developers: 2 years part time, 1 year full time. This is a labor of love. Anybody that does a video game, it is a labor of love. Was it fun to make this game?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a ton of fun. You said, 3 years effort. I enjoyed definitely most of it. Probably enjoyed the part time most of all. I did it during my schooling, 2 years part time, and then luckily I got some government grants for it. The historical aspect probably helped with that. And so then I got to be a full time game developer, where this was my full time job. And luckily, because of Radio General, I get to continue doing that to this day. So very lucky.
Well, now it's time for the thing I love asking, and I already know some of this, but spoilers. What's next?
Well,
Yes.
as I said before, there's going to be some Radio General DLC soon. Again, channel ports, Holland, Belgium, a little bit of Germany. So that'll finish the Canadian story. Right now, my current big project is Kaiju Wars, which is a completely different, but it's still a strategy game, but it's a turn-based strategy game where you defend your city against giant kaiju, like similar to Godzilla wrecking up your city, but instead of a crappy military, you got to throw in the way. A little bit like Advanced Wars or Into the Breach, if you played those games. Very colorful.
Mm-hmm.
So very different than what I was working on before, but since I'm an indie developer, I get to choose. I decide what I want to work on, so great. After that, well, we'll see how well that one goes, but I do have some cool ideas for a historical World War I real-time strategy game. We'll see about that.
Uh-oh. As we all know, anybody listening, if it's about the Great War, I'm a great fan. Which is another question, just speaking about Radio General. Personally, I think Radio General, anything in the 20th century, probably not modern, because you have C2IS, you have helmet fire, so many things coming at you. But do you think this game would work for a great war game or other periods?
Yeah, it definitely could work for other periods, but as the name implies, you're talking over the radio. So probably any period of the radio. World War One certainly dealt with larger numbers, so the idea for my future project might not use the same concept of the fog of war with voice commands. But certainly there are other conflicts, especially the Korean War is something I've been thinking about. You could definitely use the Radio General approach to that. There already is another game
Yes.
on Steam similar with the Vietnam War. But I'm sure there could be some other conflicts as well. Yeah, there's definitely room for that.
There's a lot of fertile ground there.
Hmm.
I think for Great War, you should call it Yell Channel, and you actually have to scream. And if they don't respond, I have to go out and semaphore flag. And worst comes to worst, I pop a flare gun in my game room.
Or alternatively,
Is there any way we can make that happen?
there'll definitely be something fun with voice commands, or play trumpet directly into the microphone. Bum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum.
Oh wait, that's really good because it's an educational game. You get to learn how to play a bugle or a trumpet.
That's right,
Yeah,
revelry.
yeah.
Alternatively, this actually was an idea that I did have for Radio General. The idea of doing a pre-battle speech to the troops to raise their morale. We wouldn't really detect any words you're saying, but just the longer you talk, the more morale bonus you get. So you just say stuff into your microphone.
So, there's got to be a time period for that, right? Like, because I probably could talk into it if I know they're listening, I could talk for hours.
Okay, well, we'll have to add a timer where if you go over the time limit, they start losing morale because they get bored.
Yeah.
It's got to be like a 1 minute
like
or 2 minutes. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. People already in my new office know, like, when meetings, needs to be over, just body language and some of the words. But it's, one of the things I did want to ask is, I have spoken to a bunch of indie developers, both in board games and software development, video games. Do you think that's the harder way to go? Like, as an indie gamer, to get your game out, to market it, to throw it out in Steam, to start getting and generating sales. A lot of people say this is the golden age of the indie gamer. What do you think of it?
Yes and no. Certainly, the tools for creating indie games. There's these game engines, Unity and Unreal. They're more available and easier to use than ever before. But as a result, they're easier to use. So there's a lot more people using them. There's now 30 games released on Steam every day. So your competition's a lot higher than it used to be. So yeah, easier to create something than before, but your competition is much higher. Though each year has seen a year-on-year growth of gaming in general for mass revenue, and gaming is certainly bigger than movies, TV, and music combined. So, I guess people are spending more money than ever on games, though a lot of that's in the mobile space, which I'm not as interested in. But yeah, yes and no. I think there's always the grass is greener another time, but
Yeah, there's a lot of games coming out, and I think for the consumer, because we're all consumers, I think it's amazing. But there's a lot of bad coming out. Games, and I'm talking board, miniature, and software, PC games. There's a lot of like, you didn't really try very hard, but let's see if it sells type of games. And is that a concern? Industry wide in video games. I know it is in board games, but in video games, you guys have to be concerned about
yes,
some of the garbage that is out there.
yes and no. Again, most of the games you say are actually pretty bad and low quality, and those, aren't the games you're competing against. Generally, the algorithms on Steam are actually pretty good at sorting out the trash, and they won't actually show you trash games. But you just have to make sure your quality is above a certain threshold to not be considered trash on Steam. So yeah, yes and no.
So how can Paul and I make more people in Canada and the world kind of really dig this game. Because if you're listening this far into this, first of all, thank you. But if you haven't picked up the game, you gotta pick it up and try it. I, I've recommended games to people and ended up hating it, but you will not hate this game if you've liked anything we've talked about. But how do we get more buzz about this game? And I put that in my article too. Like, why aren't people talking about it more? Like, how do we, as No Dice, No Glory, and your fans out there, how do we get more people playing this? And I guess if you knew that, you'd be,
Yeah,
you'd be loaded.
that's
But
the $1,000,000 question: how to get more people playing your game. It's tough, especially 2 years after this game's been out. You don't get much marketing for it anymore. The biggest marketing you'll get when releasing a game is at release, and during the first 2 weeks after launch, you'll get 50 to 90% of your sales, depending on if you're an indie dev or a AAA company. A AAA company can extend out their sales tail, so only get like half their sales in the first 2 weeks, and then drag it out for many years. An indie dev will get 90% of their sales in the first 2 weeks because there's no more marketing coming in. And I'm not spending money on Facebook ads or anything, so it's just word of mouth, like what we're doing here. Like, you're interviewing me about the game, which is awesome. So at this point, it's just word of mouth helping me out.
All right, so look, we're going to motivate Paul to write a huge 4,000 word article on this, and
Yeah.
I'll definitely help him, because I think more people really should check out this game, and not because it's different. It is different, but it approaches, I think, World War II video games in a way that I think gamers will enjoy. The history aspect, if you're a history nerd, like I think the three of us are, the history is immaculate, because I did look, and I know you sent me some of the books that you took. I did look to see if there was a historical hole in the game. There isn't. And I really enjoyed that about it. Like, a lot of games kind of blush over the history, I think, and it doesn't really become an educational experience. I think first-person shooters are horrible for that, but that's my that's why I don't play too many of them. But this game is so different. It's so immersive, and when you see the screen grabs, you're like, there's not much here. I don't find it that way at all. I find that sometimes I get so wrapped into the game, I really have to pause it and kind of like, all right, what am I doing here? I love learning from the game, and I hate especially when I play a scenario the second time. I'm sending my guys out, and I go, well, we're going to march all the way to Germany. We have to meet some Germans soon. And they're not always where they were before. Is that me playing the game poorly, or do they change it up a little bit?
The enemy, the AI, they do change. They do change a bit based on what you're doing, based on which landmarks and objectives you've taken, and how well they're garrisoned. So there is some dynamic AI going on. It's not super deep, but they do change up their tactics somewhat. So playing it again will give some different results, but of course, they will still receive the same reinforcements from the same general area. Be like, yeah, I know they're going to come down this road, probably with infantry and tanks. As for your previous part of your comment about what the game does differently than every other game, as you said, is the historical aspect. I think games could do a lot better presenting history, especially, again, I mentioned all this historical photos and videos. It's all freely available, so why not use it? And then also another aspect is that games are slowly evolving into, just like books and movies, they don't always have to be fun. Now, I think there is a lot of fun to still be had in Radio General, but as we mentioned before, the game, it can sometimes be frustrating. Sometimes when writing these letters home, it can be sad. And a lot of time, the game is entirely premised on taking away control from the player. You don't see where the enemy is, and unlike every other game ever, you don't even see where your own guys are. So it is pure chaos. You don't control the battlefield, and the whole game is you trying to exert control that you can't really grasp, but it's the best you can do. You're just doing the best you can with the resources you're given. So it can definitely be a bit frustrating, but that's part of why it's interesting, is that it's not purely based on, oh man, blasting that German tank was awesome with my anti-tank gun. No, you don't see what's going on. It's very confusing. And so part of the experience is that it's not always fun, and it's okay for games to not always be fun all the time. And, again, books and movies have matured, and that we accept that, oh yeah, there's some books and movies that, Schindler's List, extremely sad. I don't know if I ever need to see it a second time, because it's very sad, and, you wouldn't call watching that fun, but games are generally considered, they have to be fun to sell. Well, I'm trying to show that doesn't have to be. And there are some other examples, This War of Mine being a good video game example of playing as a refugee in a war
great
zone.
game.
Yes.
You wouldn't call that a fun
Very
game,
good. Oh, great
but
game.
it's a very important game.
No. I think what you just said is kind of like that missing thing I wanted to kind of get the words for to explain about the game. Fun it's different for everybody. This game is challenging. Sometimes it's heavy, but gamers, and if you hit anywhere on Facebook, they like this game because it's realistic, and especially in video games, there's very few games I would consider realistic, and I would put this game really number one on that list, with a maybe distant second if they ever get that U-boat game working. As being a realistic game, because gamers, it's a pride of contention. Oh man, I played this game so well, they're gonna let me command a tank battalion tomorrow. Try Radio General and see if you can stand it, and keep playing the game and pushing through those campaigns, and your units get exhausted and worn out. And sometimes you just have to pick that battalion that is not at full strength, maybe not ready to go. It's a tough decision you have to make. And yeah, it's a great game, but you're right. Sometimes, look, I consider it fun when I'm frustrated, or it puts me in a mood. But I think what you said is perfect.
Well, I think I think the game is fun, and to do my part, to get the word out, to do my part, I will stream to my measly 50 subscribers, and I will drink a 6-pack, and I will fight some battles. Because this is the sort of game too where when you get frustrated, you also are yelling at your troops, and sometimes to get them going. And this is a fun game for that, to have that immersive experience of a commander. And you don't have to be very serious in this game. This game is a history lesson, and it is also an excellent lesson in coping with fog of war and the challenges it takes to be a battlefield commander. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing. I'll stream it out to my 50 subscribers, and we'll have a good time with it, because this is a fun game.
Yeah, for work I go to war games, and I get asked like, what's a great game I should be playing, and I always mention this one. And I don't know if you had a sale in February, and if you can locate where that was, but a friend of mine who spent a lot of time in Iraq and Afghanistan said this game is hard to put down, and he felt it was extremely realistic. And I'm not going to put him on the spot, but he was like, "So you're going to keep playing it?" He goes, "I'm going to give it some time." But he wants to go through the campaign because he wants to see the history.
Yeah.
So it's like come for the fun, stay for the history. But to me, somebody like that said, "Wow, this game is heavy, and it takes me to a place that I'm not comfortable with from his past experience." I don't think you can kind of ask for a better compliment than that about the realism of the game, but the fact that he's going to play it through because he finds the history fascinating. To me, it just shows you the other beautiful part of this game is that history. So I'm excited for what's next, but I still want to try to get through this and get better at this game. I would love for you to watch Paul or somebody play the game sometime, because the learning curve I find very interesting, and just from talking to you, like I'm gonna try to use some of those as my TTPs the next time I play the game.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to join in. check out your stream. Send me an email when you're doing that,
I'll do that.
Yeah.
and then I'll
Paul.
tell you why
Paul
you're
should
doing
have
it all
you
wrong.
remember. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, if you're doing it wrong, you figure it out pretty fast.
My troops get more nervous the more I drink. Is how it works out.
Well, I mean, maybe you're just not a good commander. I mean,
That's probably what
not
it is.
everybody's
But
cut out. It's very hard to do. Like, I tried explaining that to somebody at a gaming tournament, and I'm like, I could be a commander. I go, it's really hard.
yeah,
Well, in the movies, yeah, they're movies, dude. It's hard, and the writing the letters home is a hard thing to do. Or even you know somebody that's wounded, and they send you a letter, where you're still out there. It's not easy, and I think this game really hits home runs for so many different reasons. I know the game came out 2 years ago, and they go, "Why are you guys talking about it?" Because you should be playing it. So definitely, when you have other stuff to plug, you got two fans here. So
yes.
we definitely love to have you back. But before we send it back to Sean, Michael, thank you so very much. For folks that may have caught this in the beginning, we did this last week, and I only recorded the first 20 minutes, but I felt like the conversation was so interesting. I did want to do it again, like right away, so I can get this out. And I always say this will be out next Tuesday, but if you're listening to it, it's already out. So, but thank you so very much, and always contact us, whatever you need, and because we really want to talk about, some of the great games that you will be putting out. Because if this is your first game, it's going to be hard to top this one. But I think I've played enough games to know that this is a good design. So, what about you, Paul?
I'm sorry. What was that?
No, what about you? What are you thinking as we wrap this up?
Oh no! I'm looking forward to the next DLC that'll come out with the fighting for the canal and the approaches to Antwerp. So I'd recently seen that movie Forgotten Battle, which of course addresses, I can't remember its Dutch name, but so I was very excited to get back into this game that I hadn't picked up in a while, just because it's the go-to game to play the Canadians in action. So yeah, looking forward to continuing getting better at this game and exploring all it's got, including multiplayer co-op and designing your own scenarios.
Oh, perfect. Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. It was great talking to you guys, and I'm glad you liked the game so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I'll send it back to Sean in the studio.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.